What do Elvis, Barbie, Batman, Saturday cartoons, McDonald's, and drive-ins all have in common? At first they may seem a little unrelated, but each of them became a defining part of the childhood or adolescence of one generation, the baby boomers. While every generation has its own culture, the baby boomers witnessed one of the greatest entertainment revolutions in history. Television entered nearly every home. Rock and roll redefined music. Hollywood began to change. Toy companies discovered the power of advertising, and teenagers became one of the most valuable consumer groups in America. This is how the baby boom generation helped shape the modern entertainment industry. So, Peyton, what do
Yeah.
you think of when you think baby boomers? Like, what are the things that come to your head?
I think about the saying back in my day. Um, I think about how it was always my grandma telling me stories about how she had to walk with all of her textbooks to school. Um, and how I never understood that as a concept, but I mean, I can picture it clearly. Um, and of course, now the slang of okay, boomer. Those are the three things that come to my mind first. But there was a lot with baby boomers that came with pop culture, with all of the different events that was going around along in that time. So as much as they can be like, uh, back in my day, it was so different. We didn't have this. Yes, you did. You had it. You were like, I like to think of it like they're the pipeline. Like everything kind of comes from this era of people, even though they're like, back in my day, this never would have flew. And I go, girl, you walked so we could run. And
Well, for anyone who doesn't know, probably younger people watching this, the baby boomers are the term boomer or baby boomer actually is like a real term, not just like an insult that arose in the last 7 or 8 years. It kind of consists of a certain age demographic, those born from about 1946, post World War II, until about 1963 or 4. And it's, the boom part comes from the dramatic increase in births post World War II. Nearly 76 million Americans were born during this period. And that is a lot of people,
it's a lot of children.
a lot of children. I don't know if that number is correct. I'm not sure where I got it from, but there's no way. I don't think it's 76
I,
million.
I don't, I don't know. I feel like it could be. I feel like it could be
It could be.
like,
Yeah.
like this is like the big bang of populations, you know? So it's like it's not just like baby boom. It's like baby boom. And I feel like 76 million fits in that description.
Yeah. This is a fun fact. This is actually what the Black Eyed Peas song "Boom Boom Pow" is named after.
Wait, is it actually?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I figured, but I was like, what if I'm like, oh my God, haha. Then you're like, I'm being serious. And then I look like I don't. I'd rather like own up to being clueless than pretend and have it bite me in the ass later.
No, it isn't. But along with the boom, there was the baby boom, and there was also an economic boom because America, during the war, very few booms actually happened on U.S. soil aside from Pearl Harbor, which we always learn about, which is like the inciting point to us joining the war. Most of the war was fought in the UK, in Russia and Asia and stuff like that. Well, not Asia to that degree. We actually never invaded Japan because we dropped the bombs on them instead. Um, and so because like the US was kind of for the most part unscathed after the war, we kind of had this big boom in manufacturing and producing things and you know um we just had this huge growing middle class as a result. There were things like the GI Bill, which, kind of aided soldiers in buying homes. And that kind of expanded through the development of suburbs. So people were kind of moving to these new areas, these suburb projects. And because of all this money coming in, because, there's all this work being done and all this expansion, families had just more disposable income than ever. And that's where I want to move into the birth of the teenager. Yeah. So before, really, I mean, there were teenagers before, but it wasn't like, it wasn't its own thing. They weren't there. They didn't have their own niches. There was no time to deal with angst. It was like you were a child. Okay. Then you sit there and you eat and you get ready to help mom and dad when you get older. Or it's you are not child anymore. You can now help mom and dad now that you are older. There was no in between. There was no puberty is weird, or what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do today? Or I feel weird inside. Just there was no angsty kind of rebel without a cause, like you're tearing me apart type of feeling until, well, I'm sure there were feelings like that, but you kind of just had to suppress that because you had to go help mom and dad in the factory. Um, and by the 50s, longer education, people are going to college at a higher rate, increased family income, which allowed for ability to spend it on more things, more leisure time. Kids had allowances, which is sounds great. I never had an allowance growing up, but that I've always been jealous of people who had allowances and part-time jobs. So spending power, and businesses realized they could just kind of market directly to young people because they have this disposable income now.
Yeah. Capitalism takes over. You have a whole new demographic that you didn't know could be unlocked. And I feel like with like teenagers emerging on the scene as being considered its own demographic group because it's such a niche and targeted age group, um, it was so big for not only the economy, but for entertainment. Now they have more of like, okay, like how can we capitalize off of this instead of just like I feel like it was just split. It was just adults and children. And that was it. There was no middle ground. They didn't even try to bridge the gap where it was like, oh yeah, like let's do kids cartoons, but like let's throw some crazy stuff in for the adults that the kids will never get, which still throws me off. Like I'll see some of these movies and like I've done it where like I've taken the kids like in the past that I've nannied for to the movies and I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I can't laugh, I can't say anything. And they're like, what does that mean? I'm like, your mom should be home in like an hour. I don't know why this was in like Minion 7, but um yeah, it's really big moving on and having teenagers kind of not I don't want to say run the economy at that point. That seems like it's giving them too much credit, but they became I feel like just the biggest target for everything and the easiest way to get through to them was like television, because what else are they gonna do? Like you said, they can't just be angsty like, "No, mom, I'm not gonna go to the factory today." Instead, it's like, "I have my own money, I can spend it on my own stuff, I got my own job, so sorry, mom, I am gonna sit down and watch TV." Like, they aren't gonna I don't know, what do kids do nowadays? Do they still loiter at the mall?
I think they loiter at dead malls. I feel like dead malls are
The
pretty
malls?
popular nowadays. Shout out Montclair Place.
No, it's like, I don't know, and the I it's been a while, but I used to see people in, um Temecula at the mall called the Promenade, and they take pictures in ski masks on the top of the parking structure. So I thought that's just what all kids did. I was like, I mean, I never felt inclined to do that and have like a sick photo shoot, and I'm like dripped up on the parking structure, like top floor. But
We should do that. That should be the new podcast artwork. Rent free history, and then it's just like us kind of looking in the camera, like back to back, just kind of, yeah.
Yeah, rent free. Oh, and then we can have, oh my god, we can have explosions in the background for the boom, like, we'll just tie in all the episodes we've done somehow.
Yeah. Um, talking about fantastical things and talking about what teenagers do and talking about eh, let's not even bother with the segue. I want to talk about television in the
Yeah.
50s. It was a big deal. It was a very big deal because beforehand, all you really had was movie theaters if you wanted to watch something, or you had radio at home. And radio is basically just podcasting nowadays, which, don't want to be that guy, but I'm very glad we're doing video podcasting because a lot of video podcasts are becoming very popular, especially now that Apple Podcasts, no sponsor here, does video podcasts now. So we're supported on multiple platforms. But anyways, so yeah, radio was like the main form of at-home entertainment. You just kind of gather around the old radio and you'd listen to some radio serials, some radio dramas. You had a lot of shows actually before they were shows. They started off as radio dramas. You know, you had your Gunsmoke, which a lot of westerns like that were radio shows. You had your medical dramas, so you had things that like essentially seemed like they were TV shows already, without the visual components. And you also had your news reports, you had your comedy shows. It really essentially feels like television was just like the more improved version of radio, because you get the visual component, you get something to put faces to names, and you get to see things. And you know I mean, radio is great, but there's something missing when you can't see. There's more of a connection you can build. And I mean, we talked about this in the previous episode about how television also affected Hollywood, because you could go and spend like $1, because that's how much going to movies cost back then, on the new Cary Grant movie, or the Ginger Rogers Fred Astaire thing that was coming out. But you could also just go home or stay at home and just have an idiot box on you. That's what they used to call it, an idiot box. And families would gather together every evening to watch the same programs. And there were three major networks. There was ABC, CBS, NBC. I think they're still around nowadays. I'm not sure. Um, but I'm sure you've heard of some of these programs: I Love Lucy, The Twilight Zone, Leave It to Beaver, Gunsmoke and Bonanza, and The Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah.
What do you think of when you think it, like, what do you associate with these like older shows when you think about them?
So I I think it's so fast. The biggest thing that I think about with these ones specifically is the integrated ad system of the all of a sudden it would turn the character would be advertising to you. Um but and like that was in a way a source of entertainment 'cause it was like the capitalistic, like, we have to sell this to you, but how do we do it in a way that actually catches your attention and allows you to kind of bridge, like, have this bridge of reality into this fantastical, in quotes, world that we're building through this product, which is always kind of fascinating. I love going down that rabbit hole. But um, two things specifically, I Love Lucy. During COVID, my grandma was living with my family, and she introduced my little sisters to I Love Lucy. And to this day, it is still one of their favorite shows. They look on it so fondly. It's one of those things where it feels timeless. I love watching these different episodes. I did a whole project on Lucille Ball when I was a kid too, because I really liked watching the show. So it's cool to see how there is certain entertainment that stands the test of time. Um, and then the second thing, the biggest thing that I think of is my first time when I watched The Twilight Zone. It scared the shit out of me. I had no idea what it was about. I was like maybe 9. Nobody told me. They were just like, "Oh, like, you should watch this show. It's so crazy, like, and it's old and scary." I can't remember who it was, but anyway, I was manipulated into watching it, and they didn't tell me the premise. And it was an episode where this guy was in this place and he was by himself and there was just mannequins replacing everything and there was just like like and that was like the episode and it's kind of like that apocalyptic like sort of reflecting of the fears of the time of like having nothing left after this like nuclear war. It makes sense. But to me, I was trauma. I was so scared. I was like, oh my God. Like at the time too, like I was starting to have like um not like a fear of dolls, but like, you know, there's like I had kids and the cool kids all watched scary things like Chucky and all this other stuff. And I was not that type of kid to watch it. So I saw this and I was like, wait, the mannequins could like be alive, but like what if because I had an active imagination, which they banked on for radio shows, which is always super cool. I miss imagination being used more than AI. But to me as a kid, I was sitting there thinking I go into the store after watching that episode and I'd be like, what was your previous life, mannequin with the funky shirt on? Or mannequin that's missing a head because the head is 3 aisles over because a teenager got it and wanted to scare their friend and like like when people would put them, like they take the hoodies and then they put the mannequin head and they do that. So that's what I think of. Mostly the integrated ad thing. But those personal anecdotes also came to mind as soon as I reviewed this list again.
It's funny. That's the first episode of the Twilight Zone. It's called "Where Is
Is it
Everyone?"
really?
Yeah.
Dang. I was like, it makes sense because I remember again watching it and looking back on it, I'm like, I love the idea of the Twilight Zone. That is so fun. The sort of mind melding, like psychological horror that just gets you to think. But yeah, and then every time like I bring this up, everybody's like, "Oh yeah," like that seems to be like the one episode that like everybody knows.
My favorite episode is called Four Characters in Search of an Exit. It's basically there's a soldier, a ballerina, um, a clown, and one other character whose name the kind of escapes me at the moment. And they're stuck in like this big pit, and it's too high for any of them to crawl out of. And they try to get out, but they just like can't. And then at the very end of the episode, if you don't mind me spoiling it, it turns out that they're figures, like they're toy figures in a trash can, and that's why they can't. That's why they're dressed like that, and that's why they can't get out, and that's why they don't remember how they got in there.
Oh, crazy. See, I love stuff like that. I love when things are mean like that.
Yeah.
It's always so interesting to be able to do it. And I feel like the Twilight Zone too, it just paved the way for so many different tropes and stuff we have now, like kind of bending it. And it's like, how do we twist this,
Yeah.
It's always so cool. So cool to see.
Another show I want to talk about very briefly was the Ed Sullivan Show.
Mm,
So you'll often see clips of it. Like if you see any old like musical act, it's likely like on the Ed Sullivan Show, like any of the Beatles like more famous performances, or you hear the girls screaming so loud that the Beatles can't even hear themselves play, which is a thing. Apparently, they were
yeah.
screaming so loud, and the technology was just like so bad back then that um Ringo was about to like mess up drumming wise, but he's just following. I think it's either George or John. They're like tapping their feet, and he's just like going along with the rhythm of them tapping their feet. Because it wasn't for that, he would just mess up because he can't hear them on stage.
Dang.
Yeah, but it's a very iconic show. Like it was back when variety shows were like a big thing, which I feel like most people don't know what variety shows are nowadays. It's literally just a variety of like different
Random
performances,
stuff.
like stand up music performances for the most part. Um, just any type of thing that would like entertain people. And then you had your host, this guy named Ed Sullivan. He hosted the show for like 30 or so years, from like 48 to 71. Um, and what's interesting about that show is that like a lot of like groups became like really like iconic. Like I'm sure you've seen probably like the Jackson 5 "I Want You Back" performance. That's
Yes.
probably the one that like most people our age know about. And then of course any of the Beatles ones. There's a really good Tina Turner one where like she and her performance are like you can tell that they let's just say they were in the entertainment industry, so they're kind of up there. They're kind of up there, and so I just remember like the part where they're playing I think it was Proud Mary, and they're just kind of rolling, rolling, rolling on a river, and they do that the whole song, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're not tired. Well, I understand why you're not tired. I understand. um, but that was all that was part of the monoculture, you know? That was back when there was a monoculture, you know, mono meaning one, of course. You know, everyone watched the same thing. There were three networks. There was a few others depending on your area, but it wasn't really a big thing. There actually was cable back then, but it was mainly for like regions where you couldn't get the signal, and that's why you had cable. Um
Makes
yeah.
sense.
But yeah, shows very popular around this time. Family sitcoms, westerns, because the myth of the West, if anyone's listened to that episode I did months ago, was still like a thing. Variety shows, news broadcasts, and yeah. And then of course everyone experienced like all sorts of just like iconic moments on television. Of course, like I said previously, all the acts in the Ed Sullivan Show, including the Beatles, and that kind of ties into the next part, which is the kind of the rock and roll revolution. So rock and roll kind of starts off with there's this school dance in the 50s at this one, and this one kid, his name's like Marty something, and he plays this really cool song on the guitar. But we weren't ready for that, but you know the children were. So
Yeah.
yeah, in 1955. What do you think of when you think of rock and roll? What stands out to you? Like, I know you like mainly like 80s, but like, what about like older than like, you know, your Def Leppards or your ACDCs?
That's the oldest I get. No, I'm just kidding. Could you imagine? That'd be crazy. It's unfortunate that that's as old as some kids go. Or like, I worked a summer camp not this summer, but 2 summers before that, and I had some kids and Michael Jackson came on and they had no idea who he was. So I had to take a moment, and then Dolly Parton came on after that. They had no idea who she was, and she's still alive. So a little crisis of the what information the youth are getting. But when I think of rock and roll, I think about how it really changed up the idea of having a monoculture. I feel like there wasn't a lot of rebellion because people and like teenagers, the youth couldn't afford to do it. Everything was so streamlined where it was like your adult life started so much younger than what's normalized now. And they had so much to do because they just had to help out, had to make ends meet sort of thing. And as everything started to evolve and there was more choices, music starts to evolve, rock and roll comes on scene, and you have like to me, I feel like the biggest one who stands out is Elvis because he becomes such this um like icon of the youth, and it's kind of the first time where teenagers are starting to be targeted by the entertainment industry, but this is the first. I feel like he was like the first thing that resonated with them where they were like, we could adopt this, like this sort of music is different than everything else, like we don't have to listen to the same things or watch the same things. Like I feel like rock and roll at this time started to really just blossom and create like the groundwork for um like pop culture today, and it's so fun. And then, like, I also think about, like, other things about, like, underground scene, how, different artists, specifically, like, artists of color and stuff were being, like their song and their beats were being stolen by other people, that it became pop culture, so it's, like, kinda like that systemic thing. I also think about that, but I feel like that's a big thing to dive into in this episode, so
I mean, we can
it
briefly dive into it. We can just say that, you know, Elvis stole,
yeah.
like, Hound Dog is not his song. Like, a woman named Big Mama Thornton wrote that song, and she sung it, performed it, and everyone was like, yeah, it's fine. And then Elvis is like, you ain't nothing but, and then everyone's like, oh my God, you know, freaking out. But it wasn't even that. It was he performed it once on the Ed Sullivan Show, and everyone's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I like this song." But then the second time he comes on, he doesn't have his guitar with him, so he's able to like jump up and do the "You ain't no friend of mine," and everyone freaks out because like the hip movement essentially, and that's like the big thing because people are like, the older generations like this is devil music, um, and especially with his like hip thrusting, which isn't it's nothing compared to nowadays. But the fact that like people were just like, oh look, he's gonna like hypnotize our girls, they're gonna become all over sexualized and shit like that. And I also wonder if some of it's racially motivated too, because rock and roll did start off as like a black thing.
Well, yeah, that's why I think the biggest drive for it being like devil music is because it was like associated with like that sort of other. And it's like, no, this isn't for us. So it's like the devil. And it's like, no, it's not. It's just sort of like that takeover. Because once they see that it's can capitalize, like once it's something that they can capitalize off of, it's like, oh, no, that's ours now. You didn't do that. No.
Yeah.
Like whoosh whoosh, let me hypnotize you. Like it didn't happen.
Yeah. It wasn't okay when they did it, but now it's okay that we're doing it.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's oh
You know? No Chuck Berrys, no Little Richards, but Buddy Holly and Elvis. Oh yeah. Oh, I can get down with
yeah.
this.
Yeah. Just like crazy. But and also so crazy to think about like just like the mindset differences of the time because obviously like that was quite a bit ago. So everybody was just so like accepting of it just being like, yeah, like this is a completely new thing. And it's like, no, it's not though. It's not. And it's like, no, like this is completely new and now it is ours and it belongs to the devil. And it's like, no, it's not though. I don't know. I love diving into the different societal implications of things like that, but I didn't want to go too off topic because I'm pretty passionate about it, so I'm trying to restrain myself.
We can save that for the 60s episode, I'd say.
Yes,
Because,
yeah.
this does start to shift cultures. There's a bit of a generational divide here that there wasn't here previously. And we thought rock and roll and the Beatles and all these other acts were going to do that. Just wait till the British invasion starts.
The British are coming.
The British are coming, yes. Grab your coats and hats. Because in the early to mid 60s, just a gluttony of British bands come out. You've got the Beatles, you got the Rolling Stones, you got the Who, you got the Monkees. They're not as big, but still. Um, yeah, Beatlemania was a big thing. And it's interesting because, in my opinion, the Beatles really didn't get like iconic, amazing, like perfect in terms of music until after like their huge Beatlemania girl screaming period.
Yeah, yeah.
And songs are written a bit different too. Um, you listen to like an early Beatles song, and so they're just like, "I wanna hold your hand, I wanna hold your hand," and then got like you go like the end of the decade and say like, "Here come old flat top, he come grooving up slowly, he got juju eyeballs, he won't holy rollers, he's got." I'm not gonna do a whole album, but yeah.
It's like maybe we do that for an episode. We do a whole episode where we just sing different songs a cappella and then we talk about them.
Yeah. A new type of music review.
Yeah. Kind of like how this was a new type of music for the time and everybody was like, "Wow, they're finally experimenting with sound. Would you believe it?"
That would be funny if we just did a podcast and was like, "Hey, we're doing a new show about music. We're starting in the 1900s, or are we starting in the 1800s?" And we're just, "Whoa! Did you guys hear that new Beethoven drop?" And then we just discussed that, just like, "Da na na na, da na na na."
Da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
I wonder what that must have been like for like people during that time period, just on opioids, going like,
I just imagine them reviewing the sheet music and having that same reaction, and it makes it so much better. Oh my god. I don't know. I don't know why that makes I think it's so funny. I don't know why I think it's so funny, but it is in my head.
If they're still doing that show Drunk History, I feel like that'd be a great episode if they haven't already done it.
Oh my god, that would be so good.
Yeah. So I want to talk about a couple more things before we close. You know, Hollywood's going through a bit of a struggle, as we mentioned in the last episode. But they're trying to reinvent themselves during this period. The drive-in theater becomes a thing, which is big. I love drive-in theaters. There's not many around me. There's maybe one
Mhm.
or two, and they're nice because I prefer them honestly because it's like if you want to talk a little bit, you can talk a little bit. You know, you don't have to be hushed and silent throughout the movie. You got movie palaces. You got movies specifically catering to this new teen demographic. I usually associate the post golden age of Hollywood and like the prior to the new Hollywood movement of the late 60s and early 70s with kind of like B movies like um sort of like Universal, like Creature from the Black Lagoon, as we've talked about before in Your Love of
Yeah.
Gilman. I think
Love
of
Gilman.
Attack of the Giant Woman. I think of The Fly, the original.
Yeah.
The Yeah, I think of like that era and like the original 3D glasses period.
Mhm.
So, a lot of beach movies, a lot of monster movies, a lot of teen comedies that are being marketed to teens. And then kids are also being marketed to as well. This is around the time we finally get the Barbie, G.I. Joe, Hot Wheels, heck, even an Easy Bake Oven. Um, and you're able to do this a bit through television. There's rules about what you can specifically put in television, at least like there are some standards and practices that you kind of have to follow, at least until Reagan comes in the 80s and kind of just says, "Nah, this you want." So, but yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of baby boomer culture. They kind of were like the spark that lit the match to lead to everything that happened as a result. They witnessed the rise of television, rock music, the changing film industry, toy marketing, youth oriented entertainment, essentially everything that you see in the movie American Graffiti. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah.
closing remarks before we wrap up?
I think it's so interesting, and as we continue to go through the different eras of pop culture, seeing just how the mindsets of this generation still stay today, where it's just I don't know, like maybe it's just me, like some of my family members from this time period, I'm just like, I just don't understand how there's like been no evolution in how you think about the world. And you see all this stuff, it's like your generation caused all this stuff to happen and laid down all these pipelines because there's so much that goes into it at this time. And yet here you are going like, no, like we can't like no, that's new and that's therefore bad. I'm like, why? It You saw firsthand that not everything new is bad. Like it's so interesting to see how just the different generational like overall general like ideologies and different like societal normalcies just play into our culture now. Specific this one specifically, because I feel like as we've evolved, it's like, oh yeah, like we'll become more and more open and like all of that. Like it's just like a natural evolution. And then there's just like the baby boomers, and they're just like, no, no, like it was different. And I'm like, yeah, no shit, it was different, but you guys also caused the differences to happen, like, and that's great. Like that, everybody talks so good about that. They're like, no, and I'm like, no, that's not why it was great. I was like, I'm telling you, that is exactly why you guys were so great. It's like greatest generation. It was because of this, and the fact that you're like, no, that's not it. I'm like, girl, like I know I wasn't there, but like, I know. Also, justice for Gilman.
Justice for Gilman. I think that'll be our slogan for the next couple months. Maybe that'll be the podcast slogan, Justice for Gilman.
Yeah, you know what? When we go to the top of the promenade and we take our ski mask pictures and we have the explosion in the back, Gilman should be there too.
Maybe we'll get Universal to finally, nut up or shut up about this whole Black Lagoon thing.
Let's go, Universal.
Let's go.
This bid is going beyond me. So
All right. Well, I think that's it in terms of this episode. I hope you guys liked it, talking about the baby boomer period. Next time, we will be getting a bit darker, let's say, in terms of what we talk about when it comes to the counterculture movement, the 60s in general, in terms of just everything that happened and how that kind of led to one of the most turbulent decades in American history. So, yeah. All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Peyton. You did great on this episode. All right. Goodbye.